My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Prioritization. Today's webinar is on the introduction to Prioritization. So we'll be addressing some really basic stuff around the software, but also why. Why do you need to use Prioritization? What is it for? And I'll start with 3 reasons why a lot of customers have come to Prioritization. First, if you are overwhelmed with personal tasks, meetings, and emails, it just means that there's just so much going on and you have more things to do than the resources to do them. Or 2, if you work in a team, but you actually have trouble understanding what your team priorities are. And it's one of those things where you have to have a meeting just to know what everyone else is working on. Or if you're a manager and your direct reports are unaware of what's truly important, or vice versa, you are working really hard on a lot of different tasks, but you don't really know if it's aligned with what your manager or your organization is really caring about. And then thirdly, if you feel like your organization as a whole is not always aligned on what's most important and urgent. And these are the 3 challenges that I see over and over again, and one of the reasons why customers come to Prioritization. So to start, I want to say that Prioritization can be thought of as a tangible, concrete way to prioritize the most important work for yourself, your team, and your organization. And so if you put it from that perspective, the challenges that we tackle is just how you actually create alignment across your team. I really think of Prioritization as a communication tool. It's a way to be aligned. It's not just a way to manage tasks. It's not just a way to manage emails, but it brings it all together into one central place. So today's goals: 1, help you understand the basics of the software. And then 2, help you become more effective and efficient at prioritizing tasks, projects, and emails. Help you envision what your work and life success may look like with Prioritization. And then most importantly, I want to show you the 20% of the features in Prioritization that would give you 80% of the benefits. I think that's the best use of our time for you to actually get started right away. And I hope, I truly hope that, after the webinar, you actually just get started. The idea is not to go and, go all out with Prioritization. The idea is actually to make sure that you start tracking your most important work, the things you care about, and that you have one central place to help you stay sane. And then I'll also provide some tips and tricks on how to prioritize better starting today. And then hopefully you'll have a strategy to work with your team. Prioritization is comprehensive email, priority, and project management software, and we help at 3 different levels. At the individual level, which is for all of you here, and I think is the most important, is that we help you prioritize your tasks and emails. So what that means is when you have an email that comes in, guess what? A lot of us flag the emails or mark it as unread. And in reality, it's a lot more complex than that. The reason is you mark that email as unread, but then 2 hours later, you got another email that's important. And then 3 days later, you got more emails. And now your number of flagged emails just increases exponentially, and you never have the time to actually go back to that. So one of the most powerful capabilities in Prioritization is actually turning those emails into tasks, getting reminders, prioritizing those emails, or even delegating those emails. And so I'll certainly be showing you that. But then also on the task aspect of things as well, Prioritization makes it very easy as an individual to see where you can work on today, and then in particular, how to step back and make sure that you're using Prioritization to meet your goals, whatever that may be. At the team level, you can imagine how if you have a good sense of what your priorities are, then guess what? If all of your coworkers are using Prioritization for the exact same purposes, suddenly you can actually just look at each other's matrices and realize, aha, we're aligned on these things, or these are the things we're not aligned on. This is where we need to have a discussion. As a manager, you get this unprecedented visibility on what your coworkers are working on. And then as a individual contributor, you get to see whether or not the work that you do really matters. And I think that is the most important part in all of this. And then thirdly, at the organizational level, Prioritization create what I call a single source of truth. And really, this just happens organically. As you use Prioritization, suddenly there's a sense of actually common priorities that's shared across the team. Imagine a couple of scenarios. Let's just say you have a coworker who is now on leave, and either it's permanent leave or temporary leave. one of the things that happens is that you actually have to go and understand what their priorities were, and then how do we transfer that to somebody else, and then how do we not lose all the context of everything that went into those priorities. And so Matrix actually helps with that entire process so seamlessly. And then the reverse too, which is, imagine if you bring on someone new to your organization, by having Matrix, that new person can actually catch up to priorities so quickly and know exactly what it is they need to do and provide impact right away. So if you're a manager, it helps you in both directions. And so that's what the organization aspect of Matrix would do. What makes Matrix better than a lot of the other solutions? So first of all, it's the only project email and meeting management software that is Microsoft 365 security certified across Teams, Outlook, and web. And so what that means for those who needs that aspect of certification is that Microsoft has security experts. They regularly test our systems. They certified all our documents to ensure that we meet industry standards. So, if there's ever any questions around that, it is an easy checkbox. Matrix is also deeply integrated into Microsoft Teams, Outlook, and Copilot. In fact, we're one of the very first, if not the first, to integrate into Microsoft Teams Copilot. So if your organization is moving towards that direction, we're already there. And so I also want to say that, using Microsoft is not necessary to use Matrix because our system works completely outside. But then if you do happen to be a Microsoft Teams or Office users, it's almost a no-brainer to have Matrix. And then thirdly, Matrix provides what I call people-centric collaboration. And what I really like about the people-centric side is that we recognize it's not just about projects and tasks. When you do something, you're doing it for somebody, right? Either your manager, your clients, your direct reports, your work colleague, and so forth. And so when you get together and you're meeting with somebody, wouldn't it be nice to know everything that you have to do for them? And wouldn't it be nice to know everything they have to do for you? And wouldn't it be nice to know all the things you work together? And so Matrix actually provides this people-centric collaboration that's extremely unique, deeply integrated into Teams as well. And it's one of my favorite features. And then fourthly, Matrix is available as a SaaS solution, which is what obviously I'll be showing today. But also for those in the healthcare and life sciences, we have a HIPAA compliant version. And then for those in the state and local government, we have an Azure government cloud solution. And then of course, also private enterprise solutions for those that require that. So at the end of the day, Matrix offers one place where everyone can go to know what needs to be done. And one of the things I want to highlight over and over again is that it is very easy to get started. I mean, in fact, getting started with Matrix is like the easiest thing you can do. Literally sign in and you're good to go. But then what happens is that Matrix provides almost all the functionalities and capabilities you need to grow within your organization, within your team. Let's start with the fundamental behind Matrix. There's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this particular quote is the philosophy around how we spend our time. Going back to emails, every single morning I wake up and I get in the hundreds of emails. And it is really, really challenging to stay on top of that. And what happens is that it's typically the last email in that's the first email out, right? That's a natural thing for all of us. And that's what it means to have the urgent things overtake the important things. Now, some of my most important emails are from days or even a week ago, and I have to make sure that I get to those emails, but those new emails keep coming in. And it happens not just with emails, but also with notifications or tasks. Imagine you're working on a task that's very important, and then guess what? Your manager, knock on the office and say, "Hey, by the way, could you work on this as well?" Now what do? Now you have new things that's coming, and then your coworker asks you the same thing. And so I think that for all of us, all these the increased connectivity, for lack of better words, across the organization is just making it so much easier for people to send us things that are urgent but not necessarily important. So when we take this quote and we actually take it and put it into practice, we get what's something called the Eisenhower Matrix. And it's just a very simple, powerful time management framework. And what happens is that instead of having a task list, we have a task matrix. And we categorize that into 4 quadrants based on the dimensions of importance and urgency. So you can imagine then, instead of looking at your all your emails and all the work you have to do and say, hey, what is that last thing that came in? And let me work on that. Instead, you think, what is the most important email that I need to answer? And what's the most urgent of those emails? And then similarly, what are the most important but not urgent? What are the things that are urgent but not important? And then what's everything else? What are the things that can actually just delete off my list? And so the Eisenhower Matrix helps you prioritize your task and make the most use out of your time. So what happens is in the Matrix software, the Eisenhower Matrix is adapted to the following 4 buckets. The do now, that's your important and urgent. The plan, that's your important but not urgent. Delegate, the things that are urgent but not necessarily important for you. And then instead of having anything else, you have what's called the inbox, where everything starts. And then from there, you decide what buckets it goes in. An exercise I'd love for you to do, and here's the thing, regardless if you use Matrix as a software or not, this is one of those things where I guarantee you that if you do that today and you ask your team to do it, you will all benefit, which is take a piece of paper. If you're not using Matrix, take a piece of paper, write down the tasks that you have to do, and decide of those maybe 15, 20 things that you wrote down, where it fits within this Matrix. What are the things that are important and urgent? What are the things that are not important and urgent? And then ask each of your coworkers, as well as your manager, as well as your clients, to do the exact same exercise, then walk around and compare notes. And what happens is that the insight you get from this is absolutely phenomenal. The most important thing is that it surfaces things that you didn't know you didn't know. What happens is that we can end up working so hard on a task that we think, okay, you know what? I got to get this done. And guess what? You look at your manager's part of Matrix and you realize it's not even in the quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. Imagine that you work so hard on something that didn't even matter. And this applies when you work on things for your clients every single time, right? Clients actually have their list of priorities, the must-haves, and then you're here working on things that no one cares about. And so I think that's one of the most important things about time management and priority management is identifying the things that don't matter. And that's just as important as finding the things that do matter and work on it. So the 4-quadrant Eisenhower Matrix create alignments because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. And success from using our software isn't about finding what everyone agrees on. It's about discovering disagreements on what should be a priority when it isn't. And so one of the exercises that I encourage you to do as I show you the software is think about how you can incorporate it into your workflow. And so here's a couple of examples. One, if you're a manager, create a project, a Matrix project for your team staff meetings, and then screen share it during the meetings. It is such a simple exercise that you will find value almost right away. And the way it works is the following. As a manager, all your direct reports, right, have a sense of what they think is important within the team. By actually writing it down explicitly what the priorities are, when you have a conversation during the team meeting, everyone can look at it and say, okay, you know what? I see what we're working on. I see how I fit within the big picture and that I'm working on the right things. And then not only that, what happens is that when you have a conversation, you can immediately ignore everything on the bottom half of Matrix and instead focus on quadrant 1 and then quadrant 2, right? Again, quadrant 1 is the do now, the important, urgent, but at the same time, those are the fires. So if you have a lot of things in quadrant 1, that's not a good thing. That means you're waiting too long. And so ironically, one of the things you'll learn as you use Matrix is that quadrant 2 is where the real work happens. And so if you're spending time there, you're doing it right. If you're somebody who manages multiple sites or locations for a project, create a different Matrix project for each site and location. The idea is pretty simple. If you want to understand priorities, you need to put it within context. Context matters. And context applies in many different ways. For example, context could refer to each of the location that you work at, right? So the priorities at each location might be very different. And so therefore you want to track them separately. Or if you work for different clients, and each client has a set of priorities, then you also want to make sure that you separate those. So that's what it means by creating different projects for different sites. That means a different context. And then if you're following some specific training programs or initiative, as an example, let's just say every time you onboard a customer, they have to go through a set of steps, right? And that could be on your side or their side. You can actually use Party Matrix to build a template using the priorities. And so it's fascinating because it saves you so much time. So then you could go and say, hey, by the way, these are the important urgent things we got to do. These are the important but not urgent things we got to do. This is sort of everything else. And you can actually build a template. And so that saves you so much time every time that you onboard a customer or an employee or have a quarterly training process. If you're a business owner, create a project for each of your departments. The reason, again, is context, right? You want to know what your marketing department is working on, what your sales guys are working on. And then lastly, if you're an individual contributor, create a project for your goals. The reason I mentioned this explicitly is because I think at the end of the day, you as an individual is the most important part of the puzzle. If you're successful, everything else will fall into place. And so I want you to walk away from the webinar thinking about how you can use it for yourself first, how you can track your work, and then think about your goals and how do you actually ensure that you're working towards those goals. I do want to mention that this webinar is recorded and so posted on our website, affluence.com/webinars. And then also there's a lot of other webinars as well that covers other topics, including workload reports, Gantt charts, email management masterclass, etc. So check that out later if you get a chance. And then lastly, there are also other languages as well. So if you need that. With that, let's jump into Party Matrix and I'll show you how to put this into practice. So here I have my Party Matrix open. And so this is our web application. Party Matrix works on desktop, on Mac, Windows, web, inside Teams, on mobile, etc. So what that means is it's everywhere that you need it to be. And so, no matter if you're on the go or you're sitting at your office, Party Matrix is there. So as you can see, when I have a project selected, this is the structure of Party Matrix. On the left-hand side, I have a list of projects. These are different contexts, right? And then within each of those projects, it's the 4 quadrants. That's front and center. Everything has a 4 quadrants to it. So what that means is in my personal priority project here, I have the do now, do later, not important, and then inbox. And so let me give you an example of a task I have to do. Clearly, after this webinar, I have to follow up with all of you. So I'm going to say follow up with webinar participants, okay? So this is an example of a task that I might have. Now, one of the things I can do is I can say due tomorrow, 2 p.m. and now click add. Party Matrix uses what's called natural language. When I create that task, it processes that due tomorrow at 2 p.m. and then set the due date for me tomorrow at 2 p.m. my local time. So if you're in a different time zone than me, it'll understand that part and it'll say due tomorrow 2 p.m. Now you could easily type in there, due in 2 weeks, due in 3 days, due in 4 hours, etc. And so Party Matrix will actually naturally understand that. Now, after I create the task, on the right-hand side is what's called the item details. The item details is where I can actually put additional information around the task if needed. There's a couple features I want to highlight to you that I think are most important. The first is the starring. So what happens is that if you have 5 tasks, then it doesn't really matter, right? It's very easy to see. But if you have 50 tasks, then things get a little bit more tricky. So being able to understand what are the things that are important that you're actively working on is very important. So for me, what I like to do is I like to star tasks that are coming up that I really need to tackle and that these are my active tasks. So my suggestion is you can star something like 5 to 10 tasks. And so that allows you to easily find the tasks that you need to do. And then below that, you have the icons. When you click on icons, you can choose some icons here. And a couple of examples might be related to travel, or some of the successes I've seen is to actually use this red, yellow, and green as a way to signify the status of tasks. Now, as you use icons, Party Matrix learns from that and actually can provide you insight on what kind of icons you're spending your time on. Are you spending a lot of time on travel or something else, etc.? Down below that is ownership. Now, every task has an owner. In a personal project, that owner might be me or might be you, right? And so what happens though is in a team environment, you actually want to have a better sense of who's responsible. Now, there can only be one owner, but you can have what's called followers. These are the people who have an interest in the task. Let me give you an example. Let's say if I need to delegate something to somebody, when I delegate that task to them, they become the owner. But if they update the task or they mark it as done or they set a due date or they ask me a question, I want to get notifications that there's something that's relevant for me. So in that case, I might want to be a follower for that task. So here, let's just say I have this task here. I can go ahead and assign it to another person. And now Eugenia is responsible for the task, but I'm a follower. If Eugenia responds and asks questions or finishes the task, then I will know and I'll get notifications in Matrix. To the right of that, you have progress, effort, reminders, and due dates. Now, of all of these, the two most important features in Matrix, in my opinion, are due dates and reminders. And I cannot encourage you enough to make sure you use those two features for your important task. So you saw earlier how I set a due date here. But what's the difference between due dates and reminders? And it's actually very, very important. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you have a very big project that's coming up and it's gonna, it's gonna be in 3 weeks, due in 3 weeks, and it's gonna take you 5 days to work on. Now you set the due date for 3 weeks from now, and then guess what? The due date comes and you haven't gotten started, right? And so you're gonna realize, wait a minute, I don't have time. There's no way I can do 5 days of work in one day. Or let's just say some people would go and say they'll set the start date on 5 days prior. Well, that's fine too. You get to the start date, you start working on it. But guess what? You're going to have 10 other things that's going to be pulling you away from your attention. And one major problem that we have over and over again is interruption. And what I mean by that is that on a routine basis, we'll get interrupted by new things, urgent things. And what happens is that takes the top of your mind. That takes your mind share away from your most important task, right? So anything that is actually recent just has a stronger bias than your most important task. So to overcome that, you use the reminder system. So let's just say if this task is extremely important and I want to make sure it's top of mind for me, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go down here in the chat part. I'm going to say remind me daily. What that does is now I get a daily reminder to work on this task. And this is so powerful. And for me personally, I use it in the following way. I have to follow up with a customer. So I'll go ahead and set a due dates for 1 month from now. And then I'll set a monthly reminder or a weekly reminder. So every single week, I'll get a notification from Matrix and I'll think about it. It's like, oh yeah, I got to work on that. And so by being aware of that, it helps overcome all these other urgent things that's overtaking your time. So I strongly encourage you to set due dates and reminders when all your most important tasks. If you think about the context of importance and urgency, right? You can use the 4 quadrants to set the importance, but the due date is where you can communicate urgency. So you have to do that to make sure that it's on your calendar. Of course, there's a lot of philosophy around time blocking and all that. And I personally, I love time blocking to make sure that I work on the most important things. But what happens is that we have to be explicit on when we set those times. So if I didn't say enough, I'll say one more time. Make sure you use dates and reminders for your most important task. And so when I talk about Matrix and I talk about the most important features, those are the ones. Starring the task, set due dates, set reminders. And if you use almost nothing else, you're going to find that to be the most impactful for you as a personal user of Matrix. Down below that, we have what's called the chat. And as you saw here, I type a message, but really it's a conversation between all the people within this task. So in some sense, it's interesting. Let's just say if I have a task just for me, I can still talk to it, right? I can say, remind me daily, or I can say due tomorrow, or I can say a lot of other comments just as a way to track my notes. But if there's another person, they can actually see and communicate with me. The reason why this chat is actually useful is because it keeps the conversation within the context of the task. Now, I'm sure all of you have used Microsoft Teams or Slack or any form of communication. One of the things you'll see is that you're talking to your coworkers and you're talking about so many different things. And then in 6 months, when you look back and say, by the way, what did we say about this task? What were we going to do? Guess what? It's all within this huge mess, one continuous conversation, and you've lost all your context. So by having a conversation in Matrix here, you actually track all of that in one central place. Now, what happens next is that in 6 months, you need to assign the task to a new person. Guess what? They can look at the conversation in Matrix and see all the context. They can see all the back and forth. They can see all the due date set. They can see the record of all the changes, all the subtasks created, all the subtasks finished, all the new things that were happening as if they were there. And I can't emphasize how powerful that is as you become more proficient at using our system. Next to that is the notes. This is where you can actually add subtasks and basic notes. And then finally, the resources section is where you can add files, documents, emails. And this is also, you can link existing Matrix tasks together, and you can even build dependencies around them in order to create Gantt charts as needed. There's a couple of other things I want to emphasize here too, is that the way Matrix handle files and so forth, we integrate with OneDrive, but also you can actually put in any web documents. And so it's actually really neat. That means if you're on SharePoint or Box or whatever, you can just copy those links and actually put it into the system. And in fact, you can use our Chrome extension and Edge extension to do that. And then of course, if you use Matrix to prioritize emails, the emails get uploaded in here, and now you can open the email on another system as needed, or you can delegate an email to a coworker and they can open it and respond to the email. And speaking of emails, I'll go ahead and jump to that real quick. Email management is probably the #1 reason why customers come to Matrix. So here I have Outlook for web, but this Outlook integration works for Outlook for desktop, Outlook for mobile as well. And so in this particular case, let's say I have an email from a customer, and this is, please provide a quote, right? Let's just say if I can't respond to this email right away, but I want to make sure I don't forget it. So by using Matrix, I'll go to the apps here, and then I install what's called Turn Emails into Task. So on your computer, if you don't have this yet, click on Add Apps, and our application has been the Microsoft Editor's Choice for years. So you should be able to see that easily, and you'll also see a special shield icon that indicate Matrix is a Microsoft 365 certified solution. So that means your IT should be able to approve it very easily. But this option, Turn Email into Task, I click on that button, and now I have the option to prioritize my email. So check that out. When I click Prioritize Email, on the right-hand side, a new view comes out, and I can actually capture this email and convert it into a task. I can actually change the task name. I can choose what project it goes in, okay? And then I can actually choose what quadrant it goes in. So now suddenly I have an email that before, I can only flag or mark it as unread. Now I can actually organize it into specific projects. I can put it into specific quadrants. And in fact, I can even assign it to another person. And then I can actually set a due date. And then I can actually click capture email, and it creates the task for me, assign to the person, set the due date, and ensure that that email is responded to. So Matrix also intelligently realizes that if you have multiple coworkers working together, and if that other person has already captured the email, it detects it and says this might be a duplicate. So there's a whole layer of intelligence that's working behind the background. So now you have a really important email, you'll no longer forget it because of all the things that happens because of that. But here's the thing. I told you, you got to set reminders, right? So you go to here, and now that email is created, that task is created, you say, remind me weekly. So now on a weekly basis, you'll get a reminder from Matrix to work on this email along with all the context that's necessary. But what happens if you get an email, but it belongs to an existing task? So as far as I know, Matrix is the only software that lets you attach multiple emails to the exact same task. So by going to this view instead, I can actually search for an existing task, and I can attach the email to an existing task. And so I can put everything together into one central place. And it is so helpful if you're working with external customers and they're sending you an email, then they'll send you a follow-up, etc. So now with emails, I want to mention one thing in Matrix, which is how deeply integrated we are with Outlook. So now that you have installed the Outlook integration, on the left-hand side, you can also install Matrix as a universal app. And so you can click on Add Apps and search for Matrix, and once you do, you can pin Matrix here. Now you can work with the entire Matrix app inside Outlook, and you never have to worry about having to switch applications. I think that reduction in context switching is tremendously powerful. So now I'll continue my demo of Matrix inside Outlook instead. So here you see how I have my Outlook open. Again, on my left-hand side are different projects. So let's talk about projects. If you want to create a project, you go to here and create project, okay? When you choose create project, you have several different options. The first is a blank project. So what that means is you get that importance and urgent matrix, and it's blank on it, and you can do whatever you need to. There's a couple of other things you can do, which is you can actually choose from what's called a public template. So these are some templates we put together for you that you can use. And in fact, on our website, we have something like 1,000 different templates using the 4 quadrants as different dimensions in order for you to tackle whatever it is that you need to tackle. But what's also happens is that as you use Matrix in your organization, you can create your own templates. And now you can actually choose one of the templates that's created by you or your coworker. And then lastly, you can use our system to create a project that pre-fills some of your tasks for you. So an example that I really like here is, something like, hey, I want to get a promotion this year. What are some of the tasks I should do? And so Party Matrix will generate that for you. And then, of course, we have a really advanced CSV import system that allows you to build projects however you want, especially if you have repetitive workflow. So that's a project. Now, when it comes to project customization, there's a couple things you can do. So let's just say I jump to a different project here. And when I select a project, I can go to what's called the project details. So in the project details, I can do a couple of things. First of all, I can star it. When I star a project, it goes to the top of the list. So when you first use Matrix, you'll have 3, 4, or 5 different projects, not a big deal. But as you use Matrix more, you might end up with dozens of projects. For me personally, I have more than 300 projects, and that's perfectly okay in Matrix. I mean, the system is designed to handle that, and so I want you to know that it's actually, without Matrix, I would have a very, very hard time understanding what I need to work on. But by organizing it into the different quadrants, I know exactly what I need to focus my time on. And so starring project is also one of the things I do. And my recommendation is don't start more than 5 to 10 projects. If everything's important, then nothing is. So keep that in mind, right? Same thing with task. Down below that, I have members. This is where I can have different team members within a project. So when you create a project, initially, it's just you. That means only you can see that project. But what happens is I can click on this plus here and invite other team members. And when I do, then they get permission to see the project. And so if you're a manager and you have a team of 5, that works on something together, you can actually go ahead and add those 5 people. Then you might have another project with 25 people and you can add them. And so you can actually have this permission level that gives you a sense of exactly who's in that project. And then of course, there's something called user group where you can actually associate with marketing team or sales team or engineering team. Party Matrix also lets you go and customize the quadrant names. And this is actually very important because as you work with Party Matrix, you'll learn that there's different ways to adapt the system to your specific needs and to your team's needs. And so for me, I actually like to use quadrant 3 as a place to track resources and files. And then I love to use quadrant 4 as a place to track my inbox. So I can go in here, press delete and change that and change it to whatever categories that I find useful. And then also I can actually change the color as well. And what happens, as you can see on my left-hand side here, I have different projects with different colors. Color coding doesn't actually affect Party Matrix, but what it does is it helps you organize it. So then you can see, okay, you know what? All my blue projects are related to one thing. All my orange projects are related to another thing. So it's just a way to have a sense of organization. Now, I talk about the 4 quadrants a lot, but what happens is that at the end of the day, it's just data, right? And so Party Matrix actually gives you a different lens on all the data that you have. So for example, I can go to what's called the list view. When I go to the list view, I see all the tasks in that project organized in a list, and now I can actually sort it. So more like an Excel sheet. And then not only that, all the starred items are at the top. And again, that is why it's so critical to star the most important tasks. It's much easier to find them. And again, I can click on each of these tasks. I can edit as needed. One nice thing about the list view is the ability to select multiple tasks really easily. The scenario I mentioned to you earlier is how if you have a coworker that leaves, you need to assign that to everybody else, right? And so Party Matrix gives you the option to select all of those tasks. So check this out. I can actually go here and I can go and choose multiple selection, right? Start selecting item or even select all. And I can select all item and then go and change owner. And so in one move, I can actually take all the tasks that matches a certain criteria and assign to a different person within this particular project. So think about that for a second, how easy that is compared to what it is that you're doing today. Someone leaves and you need to make sure that someone else takes over the task. With Party Matrix, it's pretty much seamless. And then not only that, you can go to here and you can filter and say, find only the task assigned to person A or person B, and then reassign that as needed. And so this select all option gives you that infinite flexibility along with the filters to do whatever it is that you need with the data. Now, the calendar view takes all the tasks with due dates and show it on the calendar. You can again work on here, but also you can actually just drag and drop things too. So that allows you to change the date as needed. Then we have the Gantt chart. The Gantt chart helps you see things at a much grander scale. So for example, calendar is very good for you to see things that are due this week or this month. But what happens is that when you have things that spans across 6 months or a year, the Gantt chart gives you that full visibility. See how I can zoom out and I can see 2024, 2025, and through to 2027 in this case. And so when you use the Gantt chart, it's again built automatically from your due dates and your start dates, but we give you that sense of how things really fit together. So what that means is if you use Matrix, you can use it to manage tasks that are due this week. And then in another project, you can manage tasks that are due in the next 5 years. So all works together in one central place. And then I'm going to really go through this quickly, but there's something called the reports view. And so this is for managers who really want to have a better understanding of what's going on, or if you're a project manager, you want to know where are we spending our time and resources. So the reports view just summarizes everything you have in Matrix. It tells you who's been responsible for what quadrants have people been spending their time and resources on, and then the distribution of tasks. Are we getting things done? And then how busy are we in the coming weeks? And so this reports view is just one way to look at everything from a comprehensive perspective. And you have this reports on a per project basis. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier is about people-centric view. And again, that's looking at the data from a different perspective, right? So in Matrix, you can actually go to, I'm going to show you a different perspective now in Microsoft Teams. So if you use Microsoft Teams, you can install Matrix here too. But what happens is that you can go to a user in Microsoft Teams and you can add what's called the one-on-one view. When you add the one-on-one view in Microsoft Teams, it actually shows you all the tasks you have in common with that person across your entire Matrix in one central place. If you find yourself spending a lot of time in Teams and talking to people, this view is phenomenal. So, imagine you have 5 or 10 direct reports or colleagues that you talk to all the time. You install the one-on-one view for each of them. You click on them, you see all the tasks you have in common with them. And not only that, you see the things that are overdue, the things that are recently worked on. And then when you have a meeting, you can actually just click on Add Share Task and create the task directly from this view. And it automatically assigns the other person. And then again, make sure you set the due dates in the item name itself. You can choose what project it goes in, click Add, and it creates the task in Matrix. So this view saves you so much time. If you're a manager and you do a lot of one-on-one meetings, you don't have to comb through 15 projects, right, to find out the things that your team member's working on. This view provides you all the insight that you need from one central place. So to add the one-on-one, you simply click on this plus here, choose Matrix, and then choose the one-on-one view. And so Matrix is probably one of the most integrated solution in Teams. So there's like so many things I can't even show you just because of all the things that we do. But I want to show you real quick how you can actually send tasks in Matrix too. So using what we call action cards. And I use this sometimes when I have a task I assign to somebody, but for some reason they don't see it in Matrix. And so I remind them of that in Teams. And then also you can actually convert any conversation into a Matrix task. This is really useful if you're talking to somebody and you realize, hey, we actually should do whatever it is that you talked about. Well, guess what? You can actually just click on that conversation, create PM task, and now you can capture that task. You can assign to people. You can put what project, what quadrant it belongs in. Matrix also integrate with Microsoft Teams meetings. We also integrate with Microsoft Copilot. We also integrate with workflows and so many other things. But I don't want you to have to mess around with that. Instead, again, focus on Matrix as a way to prioritize your task, prioritize your team's task, and get to alignment. Then as you grow in your usage of Matrix, all the other features will be there for you to help you get the most out of the system. So I'm going to go back to Matrix real quick, and I'm going to show you a couple more things as I wrap up this part of it. One of the things I like to use Protomatrix for is goals management. And this is in this case, it's personal goals. So, I know we're in September, right? And so before you know it, it's going to be a new year and everyone's going to have a new year of goals again. One of the biggest challenges people have with goals is that they'll set the goals and then they forget about it. And the simple reason is it's not that it's not important, it's that there's new things that's coming in and taking over your attention. So, one of my recommendations to you on a personal basis is go ahead and create a project, and you could call it goals for 2024 or goals for Q4 or whatever it is. And then from there, when you create a task, set a recurring reminder. And so when you set that recurring reminder, that goal will be top of mind for you. So as an example here, I created a task, read a new business book every month. If I didn't set a recurring reminder, I will start forgetting about it. And so I'd like to do this as a way to make sure that this is top of mind for me. So I highly recommend that you do it too. Now, I talk about notifications and reminders a couple of times. How do you actually get those notifications? So if you go to home view here in Protomatrix, this number represents the number of notifications that you have. And so in this particular case, anything that has a due dates that triggered would show up here. Anything that has a reminder would show up here. If someone assigns you a task, it will show up here. Or if a task you follow is updated, it will show up here. And so as you click through each of these, you can see what actually changed, and then it goes away down towards 0. And then if you're ready to clear it all, you click on this and clear all notifications. And so you can clear the old ones or you can clear completed ones. Protomatrix also has a couple of other views, such as the agenda view that shows you all the tasks you have to do this week. And so imagine having so many different projects. The last thing I want you to do is have to click through all these different projects and actually find the task. So the agenda view shows you everything you have to do from a time perspective, regardless of what project it's in. And then, of course, Protomatrix has what's called the item view. These are all the tasks that you have. And then we have what's called the search view, which actually shows you everything across your entire Protomatrix. So in terms of visibility, Protomatrix gives you all sorts of insight around what are the things that's on your plate. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier is how overwhelmed people might get. And so what happens is that as a manager, you can actually go and access what's called the workload report. And so if you go to workload report, you can actually see every one of your coworkers and how many things they have on their plate. And in fact, you could see how much schedule hours, how much effort is on their plate as well. So if you think about resource management and ensuring that your coworkers aren't overloaded with work, this is the view to see. And you can actually drill down on each of those things and reassign it to people on the fly. There's several other views that I would encourage you to explore as you use Protomatrix more. So for example, there's the calendar view you saw earlier, but now on the left-hand side, it's what's called the global views. This calendar view shows me all things across all Protomatrix, and then I can actually filter the specific projects. It's all aggregated together as one. The same thing with the Gantt chart. So here is the Gantt chart for all my tasks, right? And then I can filter it as needed, depending on the context that I need to worry about at this moment in time. One last feature I'm going to show you, and I'm going to wrap it up, is what's called the inbox. The inbox are tasks that do not have a project yet. And so the way it works is that sometimes this is a problem I have all the time, which is I'm on the go and I'm on my mobile phone and I don't have Protomatrix for Outlook. I use Apple Mail. Well, Protomatrix has what's called the secret inbox address. And so all of you have a secret inbox address. You can click on this and copy that address. So once you copy that address, when you go back to Outlook here, earlier I showed you how you can convert that into an email using an extension. But when I'm on Apple Mail, I can simply click forward and then I type inbox. And what happens is I save this as a contact on my phone. And now I can forward an email into Protomatrix. But here's where it's actually really useful. I can actually, in the body, say due in 2 weeks, remind me daily. So with one forwarded email, I can actually set due dates and set reminders from my phone as I'm out and about. It is tremendously helpful. It is so useful, just based on the number of emails I get. And especially once I've read it, marking as unread doesn't help me because I get so many other emails as well. So I love this feature. I encourage you to do that as well, which is to go get your inbox address and save it as a contact on your phone, as well as whatever other mail software you may use, especially if you don't use Outlook. It works with Gmail. It works with any other platform as well. And in fact, you can actually build all sorts of complex rules for forwarding emails. And that is a topic for another webinar. So in the inbox here, this is where you can actually capture some of those projects that do not belong in any specific task. And what that means is that you can actually capture from our Edge extension, right? The Edge extension can take any web page that you're on and convert that into a task as needed. Okay, with that, I'm going to wrap up and go back to my presentation. So if you do nothing else today, make sure you sign up for Priority Matrix and then use our apps and Teams and Outlook, especially if you're on the Microsoft ecosystem. Make sure that you create a project that highlight your personal top priorities. I think that's the most important part of this, is that ensure your success. And then when you create tasks, use those due dates and reminders. I think that, it's one thing to put tasks in quadrants, but it's a second to actually set due dates and reminders to ensure that you work on them. And it's so powerful once you ask your coworkers to do the same exercise as you, which is to write down their priorities in Priority Matrix and then compare notes. Honestly, if you do that every single week, I guarantee you that you'll find that you guys will be so much more aligned. So either Monday morning or Friday afternoon, whatever it is that works for you, spend an hour in Priority Matrix, update your priorities, right? Change the things that don't matter, move the things that do matter up, change the due dates as needed, ask your coworkers to do the same, compare notes. That's it. Just display your Priority Matrix to your coworkers, especially if you're the manager, to ensure that everyone knows what it is that you're working on. And if you're in a small organization, creating that alignment early on is tremendously powerful. You want everyone to row in the same direction. And using Priority Matrix is the best way to do that, because anyone can log into Priority Matrix at any point in time, right? If they have access to see the priorities. You don't have to have a meeting just to get alignment. And use Priority Matrix to track high impact tasks. And the reason I say that is, you don't use Priority Matrix to track your grocery list. You could, I don't recommend it. Instead, track the things that do matter that you have to make a decision on. Use Priority Matrix as a communication tool. And when I say communication tool, I mean it's a way to communicate your priorities to others and a way for others to communicate their priorities to you. And then in terms of individual goals, you saw my project for goals. I recommend doing that because you'll find that it's a good reminder for you to get reminded why you need to work on certain things. So once you set your goals, set those recurring reminders. Don't set a due date, just set a recurring reminders. So then Priority Matrix will keep on sending you a reminder on those goals that you originally thought was important. Monthly basis, very, very useful. Always set due date and recurring reminders for those important tasks. And then again, setting 1 hour at the beginning or end of the week to review your priorities. One of the things you got to recognize is that priorities are constantly shifting, and that's okay. Priority Matrix tracks it for you and then makes it easy to reprioritize and then make it easy to keep a record of all of those priorities. And when someone leaves your organization, guess what? Not a big deal, because you have those priorities in place, right? If your salesperson leaves, that's okay. A new salesperson can take a look at all the tasks that's important and then do everything that's needed. What success should look like on a personal level is that you're checking Priority Matrix every week to remind yourself of your goals. You have one central place to track your priorities. And then on a team level, everyone understands and are aligned on key tasks. Important emails are prioritized and triage if needed, and then be able to see everyone's priorities in real time asynchronously. And if you do all that, I think you'll find a lot of value out of Priority Matrix immediately. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'd be happy to field any questions that you have in the chat here.